first.
Two exactly.
Risky. You managed to keep it up for quite a long time, you know, before the problem.
Okay, I have 2 o'clock by my watch,
So do I.
so I guess we'll go ahead and get started. And this is like one of the coolest rooms I think we've had at K-Scope for presentations. So it's pretty nice, nice sunlight, and yeah, find myself just staring out the window here. Wish I was outside. No, just kidding. Well, welcome to today's session, everybody. Thank you for coming out and supporting your speakers. Definitely glad to see some familiar faces and some new faces as well. I am supposed to remind everyone that we are live streaming. So basically, if you have any questions, Gianni will be walking around with the microphone. And so any questions, let's get it recorded. It's really a community collaboration type of session today, and you all are a part of it. And there's a hidden camera up in the upper left-hand corner, so pay attention to that too. No, I'm just kidding. No hidden camera. Today's session is what's new in OBIEE for developers, and why should you care? And that's actually, that question is there on purpose because it's kind of loaded, right? And I'm going to start off kind of talking about what a developer actually is, especially as it relates to Oracle BI. Of course, I'm supposed to remind everyone to fill out their evaluation forms, so definitely do that. We speakers, we love to hear the feedback. We actually like critiques every now and then. Don't be too harsh whenever possible. So please fill those out, and Gianni's going to be collecting them towards the end of the presentation. So hopefully, again, everybody's in the right place and everybody actually read the abstract, so you can get out of this session what you think you should be getting out of this session. I like to keep my sessions interactive, so if there is a question, just kind of throw up the hand and we'll see if we can address it. If it's something that I don't know, I'll just tell you to save it to the end, and I'll just no, I'm just kidding. We'll address it, and we'll make sure it just stays interactive. And my goal is to make sure that everyone who comes to a session really gets something out of it and leaves with something where they feel like it was a win. We do like for you to represent your track. So this year, Art of BI, the company that I'm with, we've got these great extension name badges. So if you're focused on OBIEE, come down to our booth downstairs, booth 627, and we'll extend your badge, and you guys can compare the length of your badges. So definitely speak to us after the presentation. So if I didn't already mention, my name's Christian Screen. I am co-founder of a company called Art of BI Software. We implement Oracle Business Intelligence, so the entire Oracle Analytics stack, as well as Hyperion products, specifically Essbase and planning, but we do HFM as well. I co-authored the first book on Oracle BI 11G with a couple of other blokes from the UK, and yes, I do tease them about their whole Brexit situation whenever I get the chance now. As an agenda for the day, we're going to keep it super sweet, short, and simple and straightforward, but we can dive into things and get as complex as you want. There's just some key topics that I want to cover. And I think everyone's going to get something out of this session, or at least I hope you do. Talk about the company real quick. Again, we implement Hyperion products, Oracle, the whole Oracle Analytics Suite, but we also develop some products as well. We developed this really great product called BI Teamwork, and it's a collaboration tool that you can use for commenting and annotating within Oracle BI. So a lot of our customers are financial users, and they want to be able to justify their data through use of commentary. And so currently, this is the only way you can actually do commenting successfully in Oracle BI. We also created another tool called BI Mudflow. So this is a source control management tool for Oracle BI, as well as Hyperion. And kind of a way to sum that product up is within your IT system or within your business intelligence department, having the ability to say, hey, look, we're on version 1.1 of our data warehouse, or we're on version 2.3 of our BI system. That's what you get when you can use source control management, and you can kind of follow some principles of continuous integration. And so that it's a really great tool, and hopefully you guys will come downstairs and learn a bit more about that. All right. So let's start talking about development options within Oracle BI. By show of hands, let's get some interactivity here. How many people are OBIEE administrators in this room? Okay. And how many are, let's call it power users of Oracle BI? Okay. And how many people have just been introduced to Oracle BI? Okay. All right. The hand was kind of, be proud, man. Say I'm new. I'm all about it, but I'm learning. That's why you're here. That's great. So welcome to the newbies. All right. Well, so one of the things we talk about, and especially us as we go and we work with all sorts of Oracle customers all over the country, and it's really a question of, you know, what is a BI developer, what is a BI administrator? And has the Oracle BI administration tool always been enough is a question that always comes up. So if you're an Oracle BI administrator, Oracle BI developer, you know the Oracle BI administration tool, right? This is a tool where you go in and you model the metadata. To some aspects, you work with security. But working with that tool, does it really provide you with everything that you need to know? And the question is actually no, because the Oracle BI environment is so much more complex than just using a single piece of the Oracle BI system. So when we try to break it down by role, right, we have different roles that administer our Oracle BI system. We've got administrators, we've got report developers, we've got metadata modelers, we've got ETL developers. And like some companies, there's one person that does all this, okay? And that's a gift and a curse, right? Because the person is now the most knowledgeable person in the organization, but they have to do all this stuff. And so what we're trying to say is that you actually need the tools, the right tools, to do your job as best as possible when you're looking at, when you're positioned in any of these roles. So how do we become an Oracle BI developer? So the first thing I like to say is that developer, especially an OBIEE developer, is this really umbrella term, and should it really be used that way? So we go to a lot of organizations where they might throw a WebLogic administrator and say, okay, you're not administrating all of OBIEE, right, because it's part of the Fusion middleware stack. Or we might have a situation where you've got an Oracle BI administrator who's used to doing just modeling, and they get tossed into becoming a WebLogic administrator. So in general, what you want to try to do is have a way to position each resource to learn as many of the tools as possible, be dangerous in some of them, but kind of a jack of all trades, but not necessarily master of any. And of course, there's room for the master of different areas, but we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Another question that comes up is about Java development. Years ago, I gave a presentation about Java in Oracle BI. And you still see that it's very, very relevant today that Oracle BI developers should learn a little bit of Java. And then, of course, there's this idea of DevOps, which we're now calling AppOps. So what this slide is trying to say is there's a lot of different terms that have to do with Oracle BI, but not all of them necessarily interrelate, and not all of them kind of make sense altogether. And so what we're trying to say here is that you really need at least someone in your organization who's an Oracle BI administrator, who becomes the key Oracle BI developer who can kind of pull all this together. And I'll start talking about why that's necessary in a minute. Sorry about that. So if we go back to Oracle BI 10G, well, there really wasn't a lot you could do as far as externalizing any of the information through tools for working with Oracle BI. That changed a little bit as we went to Oracle BI 11G. That was kind of a game changer. I don't know how many people remember that. Anybody still running 10G right now today? All right, fantastic. That was one hand, and that was quick, man. So obviously you guys are proud about that.
Not really.
Come on into the new world. But Oracle BI 11G added a lot of new increased functionality. It basically gave organizations a way to now automate some of these processes, and it increased the way that your standard Oracle BI administrator could then develop within Oracle BI programmatically. It also made way for integration of third-party tools. And again, as I talked about early on, we've developed several of those tools, and without Oracle BI 11G really extending kind of this API and creating these administrative tools, our products wouldn't be possible. So as we talk about automation, we talk about this integration, we kind of have to look at this, what's really the holy grail? So all that stuff that I've mentioned before, what good is it, right? With Java and there's these tools, but what's it really mean in the real world? What's a good use case for that? And so when we talk with customers in Oracle BI, one of the key points, the holy grail as we'll call it, is RPD automation and patching. And this is really being able to take items from a development environment or a sandbox environment and move those through the other environments as seamlessly and as painlessly as possible. And so I think most people in this room have probably heard about how in Oracle BI 11G, they have the metadata XML version of the RPD, or you have the RPD as a binary file. And with those capabilities, you have several command line interfaces now, which you can run from the command line, or a term I heard recently called the black screens. I never heard that before. That's new to me. And so these allow an administrator, right, or developer in OBIEE to be quite efficient at how they do what we call lifecycle management or migration management. And I'll talk about where these are and actually kind of how they work here in a minute. So we've got compare RPD, patch RPD, validate RPD. So there's this whole slew of command line tools that are out there for just waiting for your organization to jump on and make lives easier. Before I progress to the next slide, how many people have actually seen or used these command line interfaces? Okay. All right. Excellent. So good for you guys who raised your hands, but we'll focus on the rest of the room now and speak to them directly. So talking about this holy grail, this is a great diagram for really talking about automation in a very efficient manner and using something called continuous integration. I would ask for hand raises on that one, but I think I'm going to get just a few hands. So continuous integration is something that really comes out of application development. Again, reverting to something I said earlier about Java. Within your organization today, I'm sure there's an applications development team or department. And this group currently probably uses something called continuous integration and DevOps. And one of the things that we like to convey is that this can be used within Oracle BI as well. So you're basically taking existing investments from another department that works on Java or .NET, and you're actually translating that into your Oracle BI system. Okay? So I guess as a takeaway from this slide, when you guys get back from your vacation here, you go back and you find your apps development team and ask them about continuous integration and what tools they might be using, because you can actually apply those investments into Oracle BI. So let's take a look at this real quick, kind of starting from the top. So the Oracle BI administrator, they can utilize source control management. They can utilize a continuous integration server. They can move that into a source control management repository. They can compile it. Once they compile it, they can run a set of tests. You can use some of your command line interfaces to run the test, and if the test validates the true or false, you can receive a notification that says, hey, we should or should not migrate this to the next environment. And then if it passes, then you have the ability to actually automate your deployment, if you so wish, to the next target environment. Now, you might want to do that from maybe a dev to a test, but you might want to maybe cut it off from test to production and just make sure your test passes before you move it into production. You might want to do that manually. And if we want to dive deeper into this idea, we can definitely do that. All right. So what I tried to introduce there at super high speed, super high level was this idea of you have so-called developers within your organization. Developers might develop a report. They might be ad hoc developers. They might every now and then create a dashboard. And then you have your OBI administrators. They might be in charge of other items. But do any of them really know about the command line interfaces? Have they really taken a deep dive under the covers and said, let's try to automate this. Let's try to save ourselves 2 hours a week or more, make this as seamless as possible. And so in a way to get there, in kind of a straightforward fashion, just as some takeaways from this session, what I've done is broken this down to our top 6 OBI developer changes. And really, you can look at these as the top developer tools. And so I'm comparing this kind of from OBI 10G to OBI 11G to now what we have OBI 12C. Oh, show of hands. How many people are running OBI 12C right now? Awesome. How many people are looking to migrate from their version of OBI 11G to OBI 12C? All right.
None of my customers do.
Great. Even better. All right. So, and that's happening. So one of the things that we want to also focus on is what are those new items that we have to pay attention to in 12C? What's that major difference? And we'll be talking about that, and actually kind of falls to the last 3 or 4 items in this list. Okay. Back to command line interfaces and command scripts. This is so important because for most of us in this room, we're not used to actually opening up a terminal window, okay, the black screen as they call it, and actually entering in code and logic. So most of us are within kind of the Windows interface and clicking and dragging on folders and such. But with OBI 12C, it's really a game changer for automation of the development. So in OBI 12C, we have a whole new folder which has all of the tools that we're going to use for command scripts and automation and the sort. And what's great about this is they finally have basically aligned it across all operating systems. So the same command lines are now available in Linux or Unix and on Windows. Previously in 11G, if you didn't have Windows, you really couldn't use any of the command line interfaces to automate. You had to kind of take a sidestep or create, if you're a Linux kind of company, you had to sidestep and create like a Windows sandbox. So now all those tools are sitting in one location. You've got shell script-based tools, you've got command line-based tools, and it really makes life easier, especially as we go around implementing OBI 12C to different types of clients. Okay. But we are limited to one of the tools, which is still Windows-based, and that's the admin tool, of course, and I don't know when that's going to change. But this gives us the ability to see that we now have the lifecycle management in a centralized location, as I was saying. So stopping the OBI server, starting and working with the WebLogic scripting tool, everything is in kind of a co-located place, which is absolutely fantastic. And this also means that if you're in an organization that might have a Windows server and a Linux server, you can pretty much use the same scripts for starting and stopping, so that's also nice. Going back to something I mentioned earlier, which is about the Holy Grail. There's one component that's been around since 11G, and that's called the patch XML. Anybody use the patch XML process to migrate between environments? Okay. If you're not using patch XML, then I'm always curious to what a company is doing. An example of that would be if you have your RPD and you're trying to move from a dev to a test to production, how are you changing the passwords and the connection pool information between environments? Okay, so we get all sorts of responses to this. My favorite response to this is that they have the same password for all their databases in dev, test, and production. So they don't have to do anything in the RPD and at the metadata layer to change the connection pool because it's all the same password. So how many people think that's safe, right? Is that a database?
Firewall, it is.
Wow. We could have a whole conversation on that afterwards. But
That was the answer I got.
but that doesn't really align with database security standards. So the way to confront that, or the correct best practice, is to use patch XML. And the way that works is we're talking about our command line interfaces. So we use BI server XML exec. And that allows us to compare two RPDs at one point in time, and it gives us the delta, and this delta in this particular circumstance would be any of our connection pools, passwords, DNS configurations, and it creates a patch XML file. Then we utilize the patch RPD process to apply that XML file between environment moves or migrations. And by doing that, we're certain that the RPD that's then generated is the correct one for the target environment. And all your passwords are encrypted in the XML file. You don't have to worry about it, and you don't have to breach your database standards. Okay. That's probably the most powerful one, which is why it's ranked number 1. The next one is web services. So web services probably gets a little more complicated than even most organizations, most Oracle BI customers actually want to go into. But there's some great use cases here. Down below, I'll just kind of highlight it. So if someone wanted to update the server repository with new metadata, right, they could do that dynamically. They wouldn't have to actually go into the admin tool and modify the metadata, then re-upload it and go through that process. You could actually do all that through web services to some degree, okay? Depends on what type of complexity you're looking at. And it will allow you to do it on the fly, which is great. And so if you actually go into WebLogic interface, the WebLogic admin tool, you can actually see some of the Oracle logic of where the metadata services for developers lies and how you can kind of interact with it a little bit more. And this is actually fairly well documented within the Oracle documentation. Kind of hover over that one for a second. And then, of course, there's services where you can pull down all sorts of information. You can look at your iBots or your BI delivers. You can do things with exporting views. There's quite a bit of things you can dive into. It gets really complex, and they should probably have a management tool for this, or someone should build one. But it just gives you extra options to look at within the OBIEE under the hood. Okay. Show of hands, how many people in their OBIEE implementation right now are using high availability, 11G? Just a couple? Okay, okay, 1 or 2. You guys don't want to buy the extra licenses from Oracle? No? So in 11G, the idea of using high availability was a great idea, but it was really tough to implement. You could spend weeks trying to scale out your server environment for Oracle BI. Oracle took a look at that. They said this needs to be simplified, and they did just that in 12c. This is a great configuration now, as opposed to taking a week or 2. You can actually get a high availability configuration completed in much shorter time. I'll say it like that. Right. So this is actually very good because it's nice and clean. You don't really lose a lot of your configuration. Actually, everything ports over fairly well. And this, again, is all done mainly through command line. And so this might this might be your top Oracle BI administrator or your infrastructure tech that's doing this. Yep.
So if you've got your primary node, let's say, the admin server on it, you scale out, there's no admin server on the second node. So the primary goes down, there's no admin server, so you're all right.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to restart. Sorry.
Forgot about that too.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so the question was when you cluster, OBIEE needs an admin server to run, and when you cluster out to the second node, there's no admin server on your second node.
Right.
So have they got around that with 12c?
So that actually follows, so I think we all heard that question, that actually follows a standard WebLogic protocol. So you only really ever need to have one admin server. Okay, and then as you clone or you scale out, the secondary instance picks up all the configuration information, right? So the LDAP, the security, all that sort of thing. Now you can always hot swap the admin server from one machine to the other machine to the second node, and then of course if you want to buy Oracle's WebLogic cold cluster failover tool, right? It can do that for you in an automated fashion. But it's the same in 11G. It's the same in 12c.
If the first node goes down,
Mm-hmm.
the second node's running. If you try and start the second node again without the admin server running on the first, it'll never start up because...
I believe that's still a true fact. Yes,
Okay.
that's your question. Yep. And that's a great point because it really goes back to how I started this presentation talking about a WebLogic server administrator, right? So a lot of times we see in organizations for these Oracle customers, they kind of say, okay, well, we've got the BI tool. it's over here, not realizing that Fusion middleware is a huge part of that, right? So the WebLogic server. So technically, you need to make sure your BI administrator actually has some really sharp WebLogic skills as well, because it's really WebLogic based. All right. One of the other great tools that's out there right now, of course, is the Oracle BI Cloud, and of course the Oracle Cloud in general. So we're seeing a lot of uptake in cloud right now. I would say show of hands and say how many people are on the Oracle BI Cloud service, but I think I might just get a handful of people. So if you're not on the cloud, there's great use cases for it. We encourage our customers to get on cloud for certain use cases. And one of the new tools that's out there is the REST interface for a lot of things, and mainly moving data back and forth, but there's some APIs you can use there as well. And what's great about the cloud is that you still have the ability to use this idea of continuous integration. So oftentimes the questions we get when we work with our customers who are using BI Cloud Service is how in the heck do we get our data there? Right? So how do we get our data from on-premise up into the cloud? And then of course, to some degree, how do we manage that? So right now, as far as developer tools are concerned, we really recommend the two tools that make a lot of sense to manage and move data to the cloud. And those are SQL Developer, Cloud Connection, and then of course the Oracle Data Sync tool, which is kind of a riff on the old DAC tool, if anybody's familiar with that. And they each have their pros and cons. I won't go into too much of that real quick. All right. Also, we've been working with some customers who are using the Oracle Database Cloud Service. Anybody using that today, Oracle Database Cloud Service? All right. So this is a new thing called the Oracle Cloud, and they actually have their database in the cloud. And we see a lot of customers kind of moving to this. So there's kind of this lift and shift effort first to kind of get your data warehouse, let's kind of take that as an example, into the cloud. And then after that, as far as continuously moving your source data into the cloud or source data to your data warehouse, there's a couple different ways to do that. One's through the SQL Developer CLI, so we're back to command line interfaces. And then there's also the ability to use the REST API, and you can actually use Oracle Apex to do some of that movement for you. So this really depends on your use case. But this again goes back to kind of the premise and the early part of the conversation, which was, how deep does an Oracle BI developer need to go down the rabbit hole to really get a grasp of all this technology? So here's just a screenshot of using Oracle Apex. So we're writing some PL SQL that's basically calling the web service. And then of course here in SQL Developer, we have the ability to create cloud connections. We like to use SQL Developer with most of our clients and in our internal integrations and development. And so there's since I think version 4.0, there's a cloud connection option there where you can connect to the Oracle Cloud or the Oracle BI Cloud Service. One thing that we like to recommend as a best practice is that as you're managing that Oracle Cloud, that you create a different user just for connecting to the cloud to handle those API calls, right? How you're loading the data. All right, moving forward to a brand new tool. And this is great for the people who are upgrading to Oracle BI 12c. Keep this one in mind. And so this is called the OBIEE Baseline Validation Tool. This is great because when we migrated from Oracle BI 10G to 11G, for those people who actually went through that exercise, a lot of the graphs and charts didn't migrate over very well. They migrated, but they look like crap. And it took a lot of time. If you were a customer who had thousands of reports and dashboards, hundreds of dashboards, pages, going through each one of those and that manual remediation process was kind of painful. And you would find subtle deltas, and then you'd have to go into each report and you have to remediate it through some sort of magic, or rebuild it completely. So what they have in Oracle 12c, and I think some of you guys have probably seen this in some of the Oracle presentations, is they have a tool that gives you the ability to basically scan through the entire web catalog, technically after it's been upgraded. And what it will do is actually pull through a visualization of your dashboard or technically your reports and compare that to what it did look like in 11G, and it'll give you the deltas. And I think they've done a really good job in trying to make sure that they don't push their clients into that 10G to 11G kind of vortex of confusion. And so now it's a lot cleaner. There are still some things that fall out of that upgrade, and you will have to go in and manually touch them and tweak them, but it's definitely a lesser percentage than 10G to 11G upgrades. Okay. And for those who want to kind of understand how it works, it's a Java jar file. So again, this goes back to what I said early on. Java is really critical in kind of the whole Oracle ecosystem. And as it relates to Oracle BI, there's a lot of that happening, if not behind the scenes, then just kind of on the periphery. So having the ability to kind of understand a little bit more about Java will really help either you or your team as OBI developers. Okay. And if you can see this here on the right-hand side, the output of that baseline verification provides you with a comparison. So it's actually giving you the comparison of what it looked like in the previous version of OBI and then what it looks like in the current version of OBI, your 12C upgrade. And then it gives you kind of a ranking, a pass, a fail, and then you have a threshold of how close it is to accurate. And I think most of the time you'll see it's pretty high, unless you have some really, really complex graphs, charts, pivot table charts, that sort of thing. Okay. Okay. The next one is what we call BAR, BI Application Archive. This works in the Oracle BI Cloud and also in 12C. Jonathan.
Can we step back to the previous slide for 1 second?
Sure, please. Let's do that. Sorry. Whole animation thing.
So as it's running the validation, does it just evaluate those items that are native, or does it evaluate things that have been extended as well? So custom dev, anything in that regard?
So as far as custom, are you talking about like use of JavaScript or maybe like D3?
It could be any of the above.
Okay. Yeah. I'll give you my answer to that, which is it's the only answer up here. Yeah. So we've actually tried that with some of our custom built tools or products, and we didn't see it come across. So the only thing that was coming across was the Oracle BI visualizations. So in my opinion, from the testing that we've done, it's not looking at the JavaScript, it's not looking at D3, anything like that. So any heavy customizations is a great point to bring up. You'll have to go in for if you have really tight or heavy customizations, you'll have to go in and you're going to have to kind of pick out those and kind of do kind of a manual remediation. Yeah. I'll pose the question back to anybody actually seen that? Customizations come through in the DVT tool? No? Okay. It's actually a great tool to use when you're doing this upgrade, but just mind you, it takes a while to run. We've done, I think, the sample app catalog, and if I recall correctly, it was near 3 hours, and that was on a pretty fast machine. So prepare to go to Starbucks and get a coffee and hang out for a bit, come back.
When using the BVT tool, did you experience any limitations or issues while using it?
Configuration-wise, even personally, my first time running through this and doing the configuration, setting the baseline, so these are kind of the steps that you need to take. Setting the baseline was actually pretty interesting, and I mean the configuration file is actually pretty simple as far as it's not like 500 lines long or anything like that. But I think you'll do it once for kind of like a small part of a catalog, and then once you have that down, then do your full catalog. That'd be kind of my take on that. Yeah. But it wasn't anything major. Again, the big thing is just the wait, right? Go to Starbucks. All right. Good questions, though. I appreciate those. The next one is the bar file. This is great, and I'm actually going to kind of start winding down with this idea of bar and some of the new 12C communication protocols for actually doing what we call lifecycle management. So this is actually kind of critical to the presentation here. So for a lot of people have probably heard this concept in Oracle BI 12C as well as Oracle BI Cloud. They've moved to this concept of a bar file. So a bar extension .bar stands for BI Application Archive. At least that's what I think it stands for. It sounds pretty cool. And it's really archiving all of the core components that would allow you to move from your BI system from one location to the next. So whether that be from test to dev, or test to production, dev to test, or even taking something that you might have built. One of the original concepts talking with Oracle Product Management was they wanted the Oracle partners like RWBI and some of the other ones you might have worked with to create content. So let's say, for example, we created content for one of our higher education customers, okay, or one of our banking customers, and we could create pre-built dashboards, pre-built security, and pre-built RPD model, okay, and then we would basically zip that up, if you will, into a bar file, and then we could go to Bank of America or State of Colorado and say, hey, here, we're done. It's already pre-built for you. But the great thing is you can do that with your own organization as well. You can, in 12c, capture it into a bar file and move that around however you want to. And it actually works really well, but I'm going to point out some caveats for you. One of the key ones being security. Okay. So moving the bar around really allows you to export all the content, again, that makes up your core Oracle BI 12c environment as far as the artifacts are concerned. It allows you to do that so you can migrate it from instance to instance. Again, it's great for dev to test and test it to production. And actually, if you read the Oracle documentation, this is their method for migrating now. You do not have the Enterprise Manager capability to do the upload, either for the RPD or for the web catalog, if everybody remembers that. That's gone. So you have to get used to this process. And there's actually an upload and download process, but they say that's for testing, and this is for production. This is for real time. So I'm going to skip the demonstration today, but let's kind of talk about that a little bit. So the first thing I have to kind of do is kind of preface this with upgrading. So after you do the upgrade, you basically will run a process in an out-of-place 12c installation, and then the process will bring everything over from your Oracle BI 11g system into 12c. I'm not going to go into detail on that, but if anybody wants to have a sidebar, we can do that. There's a lot of caveats there. So for the people who are doing this upgrade soon, the first one is your web catalog can get corrupted in this process. We've seen this actually multiple times, and so we've actually created a process where we no longer go with the upgraded RPD and web catalog, technically the web catalog. We actually have a process where we kind of deconstruct the web catalog so that we don't have all the old folders there, and we move it into a brand new web catalog. Because we've seen it time and time again, especially with LDAP. If you guys use LDAP in your environment anywhere, the system security folder gets corrupt. So that goes to my next point. There's security corruption issues. The other one is that application roles don't sync against the RPD any longer. So if you're doing any new work and you open up the RPD, you want to do some sort of data level security, there's no sync process from Enterprise Manager to the RPD. You actually have to create the application role in the RPD and also make sure you have the same application role created in Enterprise Manager. If you don't do that, they won't then sync. So RPD won't know that Enterprise Manager has an application role. So that was pretty interesting to see. And actually that last piece has actually been around since version 11.119, but I know not many people went to that version.
Chris, do you think that that's a bug, or do you think that was there any design around that? Because when I saw that, it felt like they forgot something it's a bug. I don't know if there's any.
Sprinter, Olympics. I think he turned it off.
So my question was, do you think your next to last bullet point there around application roles syncing or not syncing, do you think that that's a bug type of thing, or do you think it's by design? When I first saw it, it felt like a bug, but I didn't know if there was a reason why dev wouldn't do it that I couldn't think of.
Great question. And it's by design, as Christian up front is kind of echoing and mouthing to me. But it's by design, because what they've done in this new version of Oracle BI 12c is they've gotten rid of the GUIDs. If you remember 11g, we had to go through this process where you had to do the refresh of the GUIDs. So they've scrapped that. And so now there's more of like an identifier match algorithm concept that's happening behind the scenes. Now, could they have probably made it sync down and sync back up? I'm sure they could have done that. But if you're just adding one or two app roles, it's pretty straightforward. And also there's an open source project out there called Project Amelia that helps you manage and integrate your security. So that's still works pretty well. And to that latter point, actually, one thing that they've also changed in relation to this no longer needing the sync of application roles is in the default installation of Oracle BI 12c, it no longer uses the system JASN -data XML file. Is anybody familiar with that? So if you're migrating from environment to environment and you're trying to migrate any of the new security that you've created in a lower environment, there's no longer any real use of that file. It's actually all stored in the relational database repository, which is a little different. The OPSS schema, actually. Okay, good. Okay, and then also there's a new upload, download, refresh, storage, and migration processes, and I'm going to talk on those real quick. I'm doing well on time. So I talked about caveats. So that bottom bullet there, what we're talking about uploading, downloading, refreshing, storing, and migrating, that's a concept we call lifecycle management. I really wanted to point that out because this is a term that I think the Oracle BI community is starting to adopt. But this term actually comes from Hyperion. And it's been around for a long time, almost since the start of Hyperion. And the idea of lifecycle management basically means there's a set of tools that allows you to migrate or manage your environments in a very precise way so that you can do migrations from source to target environments without blowing up the system. And now, since 12c has these tools, it's really lifecycle management. LCM for short. So let's talk about LCM with the bar file. Another thing, and I'm going back to the very beginning when we're talking about WebLogic, is something called WLST. Anybody want to tell me what that stands for? Awesome. You guys are on top of it. So you guys learned that your last session, right? But you're right. So WebLogic scripting tool, and it's great. And again, we're talking about kind of the black screen interface. And WebLogic scripting tool has been around for a while. It goes back to core WebLogic, and learn a little bit more about WebLogic doesn't hurt. So there's one key thing here that you can run against WebLogic scripting tool, a key command called export service instance. There's another one called import service instance. And again, this is the way that you can move your bar file around in on-premise Oracle BI 11g. The command is actually really straightforward. It does take a while to move things, which is kind of strange that Oracle wants us to use this as a go-forward methodology for migrating, right? So I'm assuming that they're looking always to have kind of a migration window that's happening, and this is not happening on Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. So let's look at export service instance really quickly. So it's a command that we're passing into the WebLogic scripting tool, and we've got a bunch of parameters here. Just to point out a few key ones is the SSI, which is the instance, and I didn't really talk about this in 12c, but you have currently in this version one instance. And then you've got your two work and stage directories. So as you're exporting, again, that bar file that has your security, your RPD, and your web catalog, and just think about how big some of your web catalogs are, it's basically zipping that up, but it's doing it in a managed type of way. And for those directories right there, it'll actually create those directories for you. So this again goes back to automation. So you could actually put in like a timestamp folder there if you're trying to automate this, and it'll create that folder for you. So you don't have to pre-create that folder when you run this process. And there's a bunch of other switches or flags here. Application description, application version, include catalog runtime info, set those to true or false. This is cool because for some of that you can kind of predicate what you're actually exporting and then make real sense when I go to the next slide here. You want to export, and if you go back to automation, you probably want to run the export as your backup process now because it captures everything. So it's more of a tactical type of backup, but you can still make sure you have everything intact in one file. So you might run that process nightly, so you always have a backup of your OBI system, point-in-time restoration. The next one is import service instance. So you export it, and now you can import. So you would do this on your target. You would export out of your source, and you would import your target. What's super about this, again, so this would be kind of the service instance. It was SSI in the previous slide. The next one here is to look at some of these flags. Import web catalog. To the left of it, you see import JASN, so that's the security. And above that, over here, if that's showing, is import RPD. This is great because now if it took you 10 minutes to run the export because you're your file was so big, but you're following the Oracle methodology. When you get to the next environment, you might want to only load up specific elements from the previous environment, and that's important. Why it's really important is because if you don't select these options or toggle them on and off with true or false, it'll blow away everything you have in your target environment. So the idea of doing an export and an import is to do a full artifact replacement. That's the key. So your export captures everything, and your import will blow away everything in your target environment unless you have the switches in place here. So setting what you don't or do want to put in to the target environment. And there's some glitches with this in 12c, but down at the bottom, you can actually restore to a kind of a pre-built instance. You can do an empty, which has basically nothing in it, and for security, it only has like BI administrator. Or you could go with the sample app light bar, and these are available in your install directories. So that's kind of one way to kind of, make sure you level set your environments each time. I'm going to warn everybody on this one. This is called reset service instance. It's pretty dangerous. It actually wipes out your entire environment, right, as far as your artifacts, okay? Your infrastructure is still there, but we're just talking about artifacts and its lifecycle management. But it does it in such a way that it actually adds additional application roles that you don't really use. It's kind of peculiar. So beware doing a reset service instance. And if you haven't exported your service instance at some point in time, then good luck, because all your RPD is gone, basically. And the last one that I'll just kind of exit with is uploading and downloading the RPD. This is really neat. This is kind of a hidden gem, I think. And this is the one I was talking about where in the Oracle documentation, they don't actually recommend this for standard lifecycle management use. And so using a shell script or a command line script, using the black screens, you can run data-model.command.sh, and you can run either the upload RPD or download RPD command, and it will actually do what it says it's going to do. So if you have an RPD that's ready to go, you can upload it, and if you want to download it for backup or for whatever purposes, you can do that as well using the download protocol. And there's additional flags that you'll use in there, SSL, port number, so forth and so on. So fairly straightforward. All right. So I guess on summary thoughts real quick before we jump into questions, and hopefully there's one or two. Basically, the gist here is there's a lot of programmatic functionality that's in OBIEE. I encourage everyone to actually start taking a look at some of the aspects. Maybe some of the things you saw here, you can give a try or try to incorporate into, especially as you go to 12c, but there's a couple items here that still work for 11g. And I guess program on and keep getting better with Oracle BI and everything that surrounds it. So any questions? Guy in the back. Runner.
On the lifecycle management side of things, you touched on best practice on 11g, where you could kind of do it almost incrementally using the XML format, and you don't need to put in passwords for the databases, etc.
Mm-hmm.
With 12c, because it pulls across the whole RPD with a bar file, is there a way around that, or do you have to then go in and manually update the data source connection?
So unless anyone in the room knows another way, that's correct. And so this again goes back to the whole learning kind of, everything in the periphery of OBIEE to make your life easier, because otherwise, yes, you've got the lifecycle management tools, you'll use them, you'll go from dev to test, and then of course, you've got the bar file, so when that bar file expands, you technically still need to go in and tweak, right, the connection pools, because it's an exact copy of the previous environment.
Yeah. So there's actually no way of automating it then, because generally those passwords are different. So
right.
If I'm understanding it correctly, there is no way of automating that at the moment.
And I asked this to like 2 other people before I came up here for this presentation because I felt like somebody was going to ask that question.
Sorry.
So I'm going to point to some aficionados I know in the room. Do you know a way to do that?
You can do it over NQ commands, yeah.
Okay, so you can do it over in command.
Directly text to metadata.
But then you're still doing it on that target environment because you've got the bar file.
Yes.
So yeah, so either way, once you do that import service instance of your RPD into the next environment, you still have to, either through enqueue command, or through a web service, or through using patch XML, which you'd have to bring out the RPD and bring it back in, you still have to go through that process of automate it. Well, hopefully you'd automate it, right? But otherwise you have to manually go in and change every connection pool.
So it wouldn't be a fully step, you'd need
To pull steps across it.
Right, right. And I think what Oracle's doing in that is they're trying to say, you know, here's a set of tools, right? So we gave you the product, or you bought the product, and we're giving you some tools, right, pro bono, because you already paid for it. And now go figure it out for your own, you know, enterprise, your own deployment, your own DevOps team. Yeah, and that's what they're saying. Yeah. Anybody else? Question? Got one over here, Laura. Runner.
That was quite the run. I just had a question going back to continuous integration, because that's definitely a holy grail from my point of view as well.
Yeah.
So one of the big challenges that we have is actually the first step that you just kind of glanced right over, which is the version control.
Right.
So when it comes to like whether you're using Git, SVN, Ace, or other version control management here, we have usually challenges with the merging, right? That there's constant merge conflicts, and it's quite a manual process to deal with that. So I'm wondering if you've come across either like tools, techniques, something that makes life a little bit easier, because otherwise it's really not continuous integration at that point, because you're always having to manually integrate those branches.
Yep. Completely. It's a challenge, I think, for every Oracle customer that has a decent Oracle BI implementation, right? And typically, if you have more than, let's call it 3 developers, even 3 developers, right, you're going to bump into this conflict. And we've been at clients where they've had some really creative solutions for multi-user development and how they kind of move things and do their patch merge process. I mean, really creative. I should have like a top 10 list up here, really. But ultimately, with continuous integration and using source control management like Git, there are processes. Like, we have a tool that is basically a service solution that helps that process out, but there's still tuning per each kind of customer's process, right? So you can still use MUD, right, with source control management. You can break it into the MDS XML structure, and you can do patching that way. So there's several items, but regardless of, I guess, what anybody tells you, there's still a bit of kind of work and adaptation, or adoption rather, with your developers. Because your developers have to learn source control management. They have to learn some of these commands. So there's no easy click one button and everything just syncs. And it creates a cadence, I think, within an organization to say, we're going to do some source control management. We're going to start with just releasing the RPD versions. We got 1.1 of the RPD, 1.2, create continuous integration, then start bringing the web catalog into that. So we have 1.2 of the web catalog and RPD. But there's no silver bullet, I guess, is to kind of wrap that one up. Yeah, but we can chat about that clearly offline. Fantastic. Any other questions? Awesome. Well, thank you guys for attending, and thank you for live streaming guests as well. Thank you. Enjoy the conference, guys. Awesome. How are you, man? Joost?
I'm okay.
Good. Nice to meet you.